I request my co-presidents, Rotarian Prasanna, Rotarian Anil, both of you are not there, Rotarian Shashi Kumar, to wear the collar for the meeting. I call the meeting to order. I request Rotarian Saraswati from Rotary Bangalore Rajajinagar for invocation to seek the divine blessings.
Good evening, all. ಗಣಪತಿಯನ್ನ ಪಾಲಿಸೋ ಗಂಭೀರ ಗಣಪತಿಯನ್ನ ಪಾಲಿಸೋ ಗಂಭೀರ ಪಾರ್ವತಿ ನಂದನ ಸುಂದರ ವದನ ಪಾರ್ವತಿ ನಂದನ ಸುಂದರ ವದನ ಸರ್ವಾದಿ ಸುರವನ್ಯ ಶಿರಬಾಗುವೆನ ಗಣಪತಿಯನ್ನ ಪಾಲಿಸೋ ಗಂಭೀರ ಆದಿ ಪೂಜಿತ ನೀನು ಮೋದ ಭಕ್ತರಿಗಿಟ್ಟು ಮಾಧವನಲ್ಲಿ ಮನ ಸದಾ ಭಕ್ತರಿಗಿಟ್ಟು ಮಾಧವ ಸದಾ ಮನ ಮಾಧವ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಮನ ಸದಾ ನಿಲ್ಲಿಸುನಿ ಗಣಪತಿಯನ್ನ ಪಾಲಿಸೋ ಗಂಭೀರ ಗಣಪತಿಯನ್ನ ಪಾಲಿಸೋ ಗಂಭೀರ ಪಂಕಜನಯನ ಶ್ರೀ ವೆಂಕಟ ವಿಠಲನ ಪಂಕಜನಯನ ಶ್ರೀ ವೆಂಕಟ ವಿಠಲನ ಕಿಂಕರನೆ ನಿಸನ್ನ ಶಂಕರ ತನಯನೆ ಕಿಂಕರನೆ ನಿಸನ್ನ ಶಂಕರ ತನಯನೆ ಗಣಪತಿಯನ್ನ ಪಾಲಿಸೋ ಗಂಭೀರ ಪಾರ್ವತಿ ನಂದನ ಸುಂದರ ವದನ ಪಾರ್ವತಿ ನಂದನ ಸುಂದರ ವದನ ಸರ್ವಾದಿ ಸುರವಂದ್ಯ ಶಿರಬಾಗುವೆನ ಗಣಪತಿಯನ್ನ ಪಾಲಿಸೋ ಗಂಭೀರ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು.
Thank you, Rotarian Saraswati. That was very melodious and wonderful. Thanks a lot. December is the month of Rotary Focus Area, Disease Prevention and Treatment, according to the calendar of events. Hence, we initiated this informative and interactive discussion on heart health as the main agenda of today's meeting. I warmly welcome Dr. Prakash Ludhani, consultant CTVS and heart and lung transplant surgeon at Sparsh Hospital, Rajarajeshwari Nagar, Bangalore, to our joint speaker meeting today. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you.
I welcome President and the members of Rotary Bangalore Whitefield Central for today's meeting. One of our dear friends, Rotarian Sunil Sahadev, has relocated to Whitefield and joined your club. Very nice to see you in today's meeting. In our hearts, you are still a Rotarian of Oran Gateway, sir. I welcome the President and all the members of Rotary Bangalore Rajajinagar. President Anil is a dear friend, and so are many members of your club. We have done so many projects and meetings together. Also, I have invited our Assistant Governor, Rotarian Rangaswamy. He would join us shortly. I welcome President Rotarian Shashi Kumar and all the members of Rotary Bangalore Nexus. Shashi Kumar is the youngest changemaker president in District 3190, and most of the members are dear friends to me from Rotaract days. It is such a pleasure having all of you here for today's joint meeting. I welcome the Rotaractors of Sri Guru Sai College, sponsored by Rotary Bangalore Rajajinagar, for today's meeting. I welcome all the Rotaractors from our newly formed club, Rotaract Bengaluru Oran Gateway, for today's speaker meeting. Special welcome to Rotarian Meera Krishna Kumar from Rotary Bangalore Brigades. She was instrumental in forming our club, and thank you for joining our meeting. Last but not the least, I welcome all the Rotarians of my club, Rotary Bengaluru Orion Gateway, Anns and Annettes of all the Rotary clubs and other friends for today's informative speaker meeting. I now request Rotarian Shashi Kumar, President of Rotary Bangalore Nexus, to say a few words.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Wonderful initiative. Can you hear me, Anand?
Shashi, it is echoing, so probably.
Hello?
Yeah, now better. Go ahead.
Is it? Can you hear me? Okay. All right. So, thank you so much, Anand, for inviting us, and it's been really wonderful initiative. December is the disease prevention month, and especially session related to heart surgery is something very important as of now, right? So we have a lot of people join today, and it's good to see 4 Rotary clubs join together, for this particular initiative, and especially Rotaractors. So thank you for joining, and I know we are hoping for a better session from the doctor. And any questions, of course, please shoot it out, and we'll ensure this session is going to be a fruitful session. So that's it, and thanks once again. So all the best, everyone.
Rotary
meeting is I request, thank you, Rotarian Shashi Kumar. I request our AG, Rotarian Rangaswamy, to say a few words. He's the AG of our club, and he's a member of Rotary Bangalore Rajajinagar. Rotarian Rangaswamy. We'll connect with him a little later. I now request Rotarian Govindarajan to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Prakash Ludhani. Govind?
Just 1 second, please. I will just start. Just one. Sorry for that moment of delay. Dr. Prakash is a reputed cardiothoracic and heart and lung transplant surgeon. He hails from Mumbai, but currently relocated to Bangalore, working with Sparsh Hospital. Dr. Prakash pursued his MBBS and MS in Ahmedabad, Gujarat. Thereafter, he finished his super specialty training in cardiothoracic and vascular surgery from Christian Medical College, which is famously called as CMC in Vellore. Subsequently, he worked as a junior cardiac consultant in GKNM Hospital, Coimbatore. To upgrade his knowledge in advanced cardiothoracic and vascular surgery, Dr. Prakash acquired additional training at Royal Melbourne Hospital, Melbourne in Australia. Following his passion in transplantation, Dr. Prakash trained at St. Vincent's Hospital in Australia in heart and lung transplantation. St. Vincent's Hospital was the first center in the world to do a DCD heart transplantation. Following that, he went to further advance his techniques and skills in Pittsburgh. After spending a few months in Pittsburgh, Dr. Prakash returned to Chennai to help launch the heart and lung transplant program at Myote Hospital, and then worked with Dr. KRB, who is Dr. Balakrishnan, at MGM Hospital in Chennai before moving to Bangalore. He has published many articles in various index journals. He has been awarded for his excellence in academic achievements by the Chief Minister of Gujarat, Shri Narendra Modi ji, who is also our current Prime Minister, during his tenure in 2012. Apart from his passion for cardiac surgery, and transplantation, he is a fitness enthusiast, a marathon runner with a passion for playing cricket as well. Dr. Prakash is married to Gina, who is a dentist and blessed with 2 kids. The elder doctor is Arya, 8-year-old, and son Saran, who is 4 years old. It's my great pleasure to welcome you, Dr. Prakash, to this speakers meet. Thank you for being here. So,
thank you, Govindji, for your kind words and introduction.
So over to for the interactive talk on heart health. So the format of this talk will be, people please raise your hands if you have any questions. You can put the message in your chat box, right, if anything is there. So we'll one by one, we'll take those questions, and Dr. Prakash will answer those questions. To start with, first, Dr. Prakash, this organ transplant is something, kind of a thing which people are a little afraid to come forward and do it, because I don't know whether due to the maturity in the way it is being, handled, or the specialty, right? All those things are pretty rare in the scenarios right now in India. So what is your view on those kind of, myths and other stuffs with respect to organ transplant?
I think first I would like to say that the transplantation in India has really picked up very well. What it was before 10 years and now in the last, I think 5 years, it has really picked up very well in us. I'm talking about heart and lung transplant, whereas kidney, liver, it goes way back, and they were and bone marrow was way back started. But I remember that in 2010, it was in India, the first heart transplantation was done way back at the AIIMS. And then it took almost like 8 to 9 years before in 2010 or in 2009, the first heart and lung transplant was done in Chennai. And then subsequently is the story that Chennai became the center of excellence for heart and lung transplant. And slowly it has spread to the other states. And now coming to your question that, yeah, there are a lot of myths I know regarding the transplantation. First, whether to accept that it is a definitive mode of therapy, or which I would say in the Western world, it is considered to be the definitive therapy, and people have accepted that undergoing a heart or lung transplant is like a common operation, like we do a bypass or a valve change or any other operation, and people have accepted that because they have shown the excellent result. Long-term results are very good for the heart transplant. If I say that the survival, a person undergoes a heart transplant and he can survive up to 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, what we see, which is called an International Society of Heart and Lung Transplant, they had seen that over the years, like at the end of 10 years, 70 to 75 people who have undergone transplant, they survive. So this itself, it shows that with the advance of I would say the science and understanding of the transplantation and getting the various new addition of immunosuppression drugs, advance in immunosuppression, and even in technology, the transplant today is, I think, is far away from the myth. And to my surprise, I've seen that in what changes I've seen after coming in the last 3 or 4 years, the transplant has really picked up in all the states of India. And I hope that it will be soon that where people will understand that it is a definitive mode of therapy and people will accept it more, because we are giving good results now. There are results where I was working with Dr. KRB in Chennai, and that is one of the unit which has done most heart transplant in country. That is around more than 500 plus. And we have published our results also, which shows that the survival at the end of 1 year, a person undergoing a transplant is surviving at the 1 year is 90%. And we subsequently found that 5 and 10 years, it is around 80%. So this shows that we have come far away what was achieved, what was thought as an impossible.
Thank you. I think that's a very important statistics which you have given to us. The other question I have is that you have seen in the news all those things, when the heart transplant happens, there is a certain window available, right? From the donor to be, to go to the other person. So what is that?
So basically, we call is at an ischemia time. Like you have a donor and a recipient. Like for the heart, before you take the heart out from a donor and put it in the recipient, the person, the maximum for the heart, you can go around 3.5 to 4 hours. But if there is a delay, and if you put that heart into that person, the chances that heart may work is very less, which was thought. But since 2014, my mentor at St. Vincent, which is Dr. Kumud Detal, which I was fortunate to train under him, he developed a technique which is called a DCD heart. So this is basically a donation after circulatory death. What I mean to say by that is that normally we have a brain dead donation, like a person is who had a road traffic accident and he is brain dead. So we take that patient as a donor. What I mean to say by DCD is where the patient is on ventilator and on high medications, which are essential for him to keep him alive, but he is neurologically well. But the moment you disconnect from the ventilator or stop this drugs or medication on him, he will die. So what it was found that when you take the organ from those sort of patients and put them on a machine, that is, we put the heart on that machine, and which in our medical term, it is called reanimate the heart. That is, we put the heart on a machine and study the heart, whether this heart, even after 4 hours or 5 hours, will definitely work or not work. So this technique is one of the newest, which has become now the acceptable in US, very pretty, even in Europe. And in India, it is the only hindrance in India to get this is because of the cost of the machine is very high. But we are trying to, in subsequent years, we can see that this will also happen in India. So in that way, if we put the heart from the donor's body to this machine, and we can subsequently increase the duration from 3 hours to like 6 hours and 8 hours, and then study. And if the heart is fine, then we can do the transplant.
Yeah, because that's very much needed in the current scenario in India, especially where moving on from one place in a particular city to other takes easily 2 to 3 hours. So that way, I think this will be very helpful for India if it has come over here.
I would say that the adult donors who meet with a road traffic accident, and from them we take the hearts, we usually we accept it around 4.5 to 5 hours duration, because we know that the hearts are good and they will really, if you implant this heart into the patient's body, they'll really work. But if you have certain age, like around 50 years or 55 years of donor is there, and then if the distance is like 4.5 and 5 hours, then you really you have this sort of you're in dual mind whether this heart will work or not. So, but if you have this sort of a technology at your disposal, then I'm pretty sure then you will be you'll be confident enough that it is going to work. And the only limitation is the cost, because the disposable and the machine is too costly. Yeah, it is around 1.5 to 2 CR with the disposable. So every time you use this machine and disposable, it's going to be too costly.
Too costly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we will subsequent, I think in the near future, we may see that we may come up with the local machine. We are trying to do something that we can locally have this sort of a technology, and it may benefit from our Indian patients also.
Okay, thank you. So that's now coming to lungs, because I see in your profile, you're also a specialist in lung transplant also. So recent COVID times, we heard a lot of news where, the entire lungs got, failed, and, they were there to have an oxygen place. And there's a chances of, the regrowing of the lungs muscle or whatever in the technique terms is very rare chances. How does that lung transplant helps in the current scenario, especially the COVID patients?
Yeah, it is true that as we all have been through this COVID pandemic, unfortunately, which has come, and we are still dealing with this COVID pandemic. I would not say it is no longer very what it was very looking to be threatening like one year back thanks to having all these vaccines. It is pretty controlled, but till we don't know, because we are not still aware about this virus, how it's mutating, and we don't know still the characteristic about all this mutant variants till now the Omicron has come. Now you pointed out that what happens exactly is the COVID virus is usually, yes, it affects more the lungs, and it goes and affects the air sac. And usually once that happens, usually in our language, the lungs, they become more stiff. That is, you'll see that most of the patients, initially they will be on oxygen. And if if they are well managed initially, then they may get away. But then they go on ventilators, and then subsequently you feel that the lungs are too stiff and they are beyond the recovery chances. Yes, in those sort of patients, we have done lung transplants, but it is very premature for me to say that it is the choice of treatment. But yes, we attempted and we have found success also, but we need to wait till we can say that it is a definitive therapy, because we don't have the follow-up for 2 years or 3 years before we can say yes. But yes, we have found that it has worked in few patients, and we have lost also few patients. The only difference in whom we transplanted earlier, we have found the success. But those patients who are stuck on ventilator or on ECMO machines for a long, like 2 months, 3 months, we have waited. And because the COVID doesn't affects only the lungs, it affects the lot of other organs also. And apart from that, we have seen that it causes bleeding and all that stuff. So when this complication happens, so we usually defer to go for the transplant. Yeah. So what I mean to say by this is that if you have a patient who's having COVID and he's slowly deteriorating, and we feel that there is no chance of lung recovery, if we do a transplant in them, I think the chances of their survival is very better. But if you take those sort of subsets of patient where they are on a long term, they have been on ventilator like beyond 3.5 months or 4 months, or plus they are having a multi-organ issue. Apart from lungs, their kidneys are involved, or liver or other organs are involved. Third, if they're very frail, I mean to say they're very weak, because once you are on ventilator, you lose all your muscle power and everything, and you're on a lot of medication. So usually your body, your all strength and everything goes, your muscle starts to lose. So if they're very frail, the chances of success in those sort of patients are very, I would not say like in other subsets is very high, but in this I would say very less.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to be very careful when you choose your patients whom will benefit and who will not benefit.
Okay. Thank you. Now we'll go to the participants here. If anyone has any questions, please, feel free to unmute yourself and can ask.
Dr. Prakash, I have a question. So, what is the regulatory aspects in India about organ transplant, and how do we become organ donors? Just broadly, if you can indicate the requirements as to how we would take it up, as in give our names to donate our organs. What is the procedure broadly? Thanks.
I think we don't have from the government of India the exact body appointed who can say that we can become a donor or anything, because like if you see in Western world, like when in US or Australia or anything, they usually get in Spain, where the organ donation is way far ahead than any other part of any other country in the world. They get registered themselves, and whenever they met with an accident or the terminal, and usually the names flag up that this person is registered for donation. So that is how. But in India, unfortunately we don't have that that sort of law still. But I think what I suggest is that, like if like a Rotarian being a big organization, if you all can come up with with your all Rotary clubs in Bangalore or Karnataka and form your certain amendments that those who are willing to be an organ donor, please give the names, and that's you can maintain a record of that, and then you can forward it to the Karnataka government or anything, or something apart from this at the state level can be done. Then you can form a regulatory law or something. But unfortunately in India we don't have that. So most of them, if you see the donations or anything, it's basically our counselors, those who convert them into the donors, right? So we need to form a proper amendments that is very in our country, that if you want to become a donor, you can fill this form and submit your name, and there should be an national level registry should be maintained, which automatically have all the names. That is how we can go ahead. So first it has to be formed within the organization. This organization then go to the state, and from state it can go to at the national level. That is what I feel if we form in this way, it will be good.
Also, any of our identities like driving license or something to carry that I'm an organ donor.
The
kind of
card,
thing would be,
the card, yeah, that
Yeah.
could also be added. That will also be very help.
Okay. Any other questions, anyone?
Can people with comorbidities be donors?
Ma'am, could you be a little bit more specific about the comorbidities, ma'am?
Like diabetes and
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
hypertension.
Definitely. There is no restriction that a patient who has a diabetes or hypertension. Only thing is that you need to be careful in selecting those donors. You have to know if they have any secondary organ involvement, because we know diabetes and hypertension, they involve the other organs. So we have to be very careful whether the kidneys are okay, the liver is okay. So you have to be very careful that they don't have any other organ involvement because of the primary disease. So you can definitely be
Why other organs? Suppose I have some complaints, does it hamper?
Sorry, ma'am. No, as I said that if you have a diabetes or you have a hypertension, so it usually affects I mean to say that if you are young and everything is okay, but if you are above 60 or 65, then there will be a lot of even those who are accepting the organ, they'll be a little bit hesitant to take that organ. I mean to say that. And apart, if you're on hypertension, then automatically it affects the heart also. So your muscle, the left side of the ventricle, it becomes a little bit more stiff and all. There are a lot of factors which we take into account before we really accept the patient with the comorbidities. Yes, that they can be, but in general, you can be if there is no much effect on other organs. That I mean to say that. I hope I'm clear, Meeraji. You understand?
You're clear. The only thing is, how often do these transplants happen? I mean, is there a frequent thing these days? Or?
Yes. So when I was in Chennai, you would be surprised to know that I think in a week we used to do 3 or 4, and so it is pretty now, because because the COVID has been well controlled and it is here, so the donation rates have really picked up. So if you see, I usually see that in every state, like in Gujarat, which was before the COVID, before I would say it was nowhere for the getting in donors and all that. Now, since last 1.5 years, Surat, Ahmedabad, they've really picked up for the donation. I'm saying where the donation originally started in Tamil Nadu, there it's decreasing, but it has increased in Maharashtra, Gujarat, and Telangana. So, and even I'm seeing that in Bangalore also, the donation rates are increasing. So the donation rates are increasing, and we have a waiting list where the transplants are happening at a regular interval.
Which are the hospitals in Bangalore which handle these operations?
I'm pretty new, but I know that few Narayana Vidyalaya does the transplant. The few Aster has done few, and I think Ramaya Hospital has done. So that is what I'm aware about. I'm not aware about the Jayadeva had done 1, 2, or 3 for the last 10 or 12 years. So there is not a well-established one center where you can have all the organs. Means the transplantation. So basically that is an idea which we have come to Sparsh Hospital with a whole team, where we are going to do a heart, lung, and the mechanical circulatory assist device services here in Bangalore. And apart from that, at Sparsh, they do liver, they do kidney, they do bone marrow, pancreas transplants are already they are doing with that. So basically at our center, we are going to cover the whole spectrum of the transplant now.
That's nice to know. And Sparsh, where we here in Yeshwanthpur or the?
So Yeshwanthpur, we will be doing transplant there also, ma'am. And RR will be our main hub, because we feel that it is a pretty nice big space for us. But we are going to concentrate on Yeshwanthpur and RR. Infantry is its unit is there. We'll see how the things go. But we are going to concentrate initially on those 2 centers.
There's one question
Govind, in the chat box, there's a question.
Yeah, please go ahead. Sunil.
Any age restriction for the donor and the average cost?
Now there are two questions in this. So any age restriction for the donor, as far as initially it was considered as 60, but now we have taken even lungs from 70 years, provided that the lungs are good and patient has good lungs. I mean, when we do the lung transplantation, when we accept the lungs, we meet by the gases, the oxygen levels are good. So that means he has been non-smoker and all. So there are a lot of factors, but about 60 and 65, that is the age limit for it. Regarding the average cost, so I want to know whether it is about the cost for the transplant or for the donation or what. I want to be
The cost for the transplant, basically,
Transplant.
the complete cost.
The cost for the transplant, see, different centers have the different cost. So what we have done is that we are going to do between 20 to 25 is heart and between 30 to 35 is lung. That is what we have decided. But it is not that this could be the cost, but it could, there could be some sort of other, provided the management supports us and says, yes, you can even reduce the cost. So that is it. This is an average cost, which is all around, I think in India, this is what is the cost of the heart and lung transplant.
Is this covered by insurance, medical insurance?
No, it's not covered. And I would love if the insurance cover, because in US and in Australia, in US, the insurance pretty much cover everything except the, I would say the antiviral drugs and antifungal drugs. I still hope that we can come with this, insurance companies can chip in, and then really then all the patients who really need to undergo this transplant, they can, the therapy can be at their disposable,
And one more question. At what stage?
I would just to interrupt, I would just even clarify, there are other states where they support for the transplant to the patients who come from underprivileged. The Tamil Nadu where I work, the government, the chief minister, they have allocated 15 lakhs for the heart transplant. Lung transplant is again 15 lakh. And if you have a heart and lung transplant, they give 20 lakhs. So those who fulfill this criteria of underprivileged, wherever any center where they go, they can get registered in Tamil Nadu and they can get the benefit of this. That's a chief minister scheme. Same in Gujarat, but they have made it like 9 lakhs for heart, 9 lakh for lung, and some 12 to 15 for heart and lung. But I don't think in Karnataka there is, to my knowledge, that we have this sort of some chief minister scheme going on. So it is in Karnataka, everyone has to pay from their own pocket.
February 1st weekend that go.
Yes, yes, I interrupted Mr. Sunil. Please go ahead. Sorry.
I have a very simple question. At what stage you decide that the heart transplant is necessary? And what are the chances that the body will not accept the alien heart? Any compatibility report is required for the heart transplant?
So first question, coming to your first question, that when do we decide that this patient needs a heart transplant?
Yeah.
Am I correct if I got your
Yes.
this question? Yeah.
So
it depends. So if you come to there are subsets of disease in heart which says that this patient requires. So I will not go into the details of that disease or anything. But first, if a person is having the heart is fully, I would try to explain in layman language that if the heart is completely dilated, right, and it requires a lot of work to do its function. I mean to say, we all know that heart is the most important organ of our body, and it has to give the blood to all the organs of the body. Now, if this heart is dilated and weak, it is not able to pump the blood to the other organs which are required. So this heart, we call it as a fail heart. So there could be various reasons for it fail. First, if you see that if the patient has some sort of disease in the arteries, which is called coronary artery, which we call as an ischemic cardiomyopathy in our language. Then the other, which I said is a plain as a dilated cardiomyopathy. In that, there are a lot of subsets, like they can be familial or they can be genetic. The third is the congenital, where the child is born with the defect, which we feel that it is beyond the repair and it requires a transplant. So there are these are the three sort of subsets where we feel that those patients may require a transplant. So it is not, that is how the disease progress and how symptomatic they are. That is what is very important for us. Like normally, if you see if a patient has this sort of disease, but is able to do his routine work without any help or anything, it means he's not in that stage where we have to give him the choice of heart transplant, where it could be easily managed by the drugs. So when he goes beyond to stage 3 or stage 4, when we feel that, I think this is a time where we have to talk to him and make him understand that if he undergoes a heart transplant, he can have a better life than what he's having. The restriction will not be there. That at that stage, we give them the choice for the transplant. Now, coming to your second question, that about the whether the alien heart from the other's body will be accepted. Yes, we do a lot of tests, which we do a cross matching before we decide that this heart particular from this. And to the basic thing, what we do is that we match first a person having a B blood group. We try to get it from B blood group only. A person with A blood group only. O, as we call a universal donor. So O has to have O, right? A can have even O's heart also, but we try to prefer A person as a donor for him. Then we do a cross matching, and that cross matching will definitely tell us whether. So what we see in cross matching, I mean to say that the patient's blood and the donor's serum, we look into the microscope and we see whether the blood, whatever the blood interaction is there, the cells are not dead. So that is once we see that and we feel that yes, it is the pathologist says the cross match is okay, you can go ahead. Then we come to the second level. Before that, we do our immunology test to see that whether the antigens or what I'm having, the donor should not have the same antibodies against it. So what happens is that if this happens, then suddenly our body, our immune system will start developing antibodies against that organ. So it will, instead of accepting, it will reject. So that is also very important. So we take a lot of consideration before saying that, yes, patient can undergo a transplant. I hope I've answered both of your questions.
Thank you. Yes.
Shall I question? I am Anar Patel.
Yeah, sure, sir.
From
Please,
Gujarat.
yeah, please, sir.
Sir, I am having diabetes from years and very care control keeping it with the effect to the organs after 20 years, having diabetes and very good controls.
So diabetes, as we know, it affects your eyes in the long term, it affects your kidneys in long term, and it affects even the nervous system of your nervous system also. So you need a proper control and you should regularly meet your endocrinologist. And I hope that you must be knowing very well, because you must be consulting your endocrinologist very often. So the diabetes it affects all the system. And if you're on insulin, then you need really a good control of your diabetes, because if you're on insulin rather than an oral medication, it affects much faster. But I would say that you should be under watchful for your diabetes.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a moment. You'll be back in a moment. Please, can you please put a note in this thing? Yeah. So,
Dr. Prakash, we have a lot of youngsters in today's meeting today, the Rotractors from 2 clubs. So I would want you to speak on the ways and means that they can have a healthy heart and healthy lungs, because so if you can give your insight on this, it would be very helpful.
What I feel is most important thing is your daily routine habits and activities, which makes you have a very healthy heart and healthy lungs. First, I think when you are very young and you're very young and robust, I think the most important thing we need to channelize our energy. And I feel is that they should involve in rather than eating most of junk foods, into the healthy habits, like in healthy food. And once in a while, eating junk food is not going to harm. But if you rather than eat daily junk foods, pizzas, burgers, and have a lot of fried foods, it's definitely going to be, it affects your heart. And at the same time, if you smoke, it's definitely going to affect your lungs also. Rather than, I would say that 30 minutes to 45 minutes of daily devoting to exercise or a physical activity daily, and eating a lot of healthy food like your vegetables or even the meat also, even if you eat meat or non-veg, but in a moderate amount is accepted, not beyond the moderate amount, right? So there are, I think most of the youngsters now, they are gym freak. They usually like to go to gym, and they like to build up muscles and all that thing. So I feel that they must be quite aware that what they should do and what not they should do. And they would be very smart enough to know also what affects them and what affects the body, or what doesn't affects. Yeah, I would recommend that doing an exercise at least 30 to 40 minutes a daily is must.
So, Doctor, I have one more question. Given these times, the COVID times, right? I've heard a lot of bad news is that where some celebrities who are even a fitness freak, right, at the age of 40, 45 plus, right? They said they went to gym and then suddenly collapsed. Even I heard a CEO who's collapsed in the gym, one of the things. So is that something, any kind of parameter which they have to keep in mind, right? Or condition, something they keep in mind when they try to do this kind of exercises, and even they're fit enough, but they say they've been collapsed due to heart attack or whatever it is, right? So is there any suggestion, something you want to give to for those people who even go to gym, right, to take care of this?
The first important thing is that when you even start lifting weights or going to the gym, I think the first condition everybody, if you see in a gym, it is written that consult your physician first before starting going to the gym. I think everybody should make sure that we should have our routine checkup well done before we hit the gym, yeah, that's very important, because from there you will come to know exactly that whether how healthy you are. That is one thing. And we know that most of the youngsters who wants to get the muscle built fast, and they take a lot of steroids and all that thing. So I think these anabolic steroids are very harmful. And third, like, we should know our limits, that I could lift this much. And if you want to go beyond, then it is always best to do under supervision. What I feel, you should have a personal trainer or even someone with you who can monitor you, whether your position is right, or you are lifting a proper weight which is suitable for you, right? So these are all things which should be kept in mind, I would say, rather than. And fourth thing is that there could be a genetic predisposition also associated, that, as you said, rightly mentioned, that now we even see that most of the heart attacks are more commonly happening in young patients. So this doesn't mean that everything is related to like exercise or what. It's genetic. So still there could be a possibility of genetic in them that could be the cause, but I would not say that certainly it is, but you should always keep that thing also in mind.
Okay. Thank you. The floor is open for more questions.
Any more questions from anyone?
From my side, I have a few more questions. If there is no more questions from the members. So food control they're talking about, right? You talked about we do have vegetables and fruits and other things, right? To make sure that you maintain the proper diet and the thing. Is there something kind of recommended for vegetables or fruits which you have something in mind, something to related to thing, or any vegetable or fruits which you should avoid, especially who are under this radar of heart things?
I think you should have a balanced diet.
Okay.
In general, I would say have a balanced diet. It's very difficult to choose that this diet is good, everything is good, all the vegetables, all the fruits, everything is good.
Okay.
Yeah, that is what I would say, but it doesn't mean you should have a balanced diet, an all-round balanced diet.
Okay.
I can't say any particular that this food is this fruit is good, this is bad, because according to me, all the vegetables and fruits are good.
Okay.
They are for healthy, it's healthier stuff and everybody can eat.
Yeah, right. Okay. And related to the heart attack, see, most of the people avoid the pain in the heart or something. Is there any kind of a warning or something which immediately they have to take care? They have some symptoms which to go to a doctor immediately related to the heart stuff.
So if you commonly see that the most of the patients like who are not having a diabetes or like a normal, if they have sort of a first thing is that they have some sort of there is not a particular symptoms in which the heart attack is going to a patient can have, but these are all what I'm trying to say is that you can keep all these things in mind. Like suddenly some of the patients may have suddenly after having a food, they feel some sort of a very fullness in the chest, or like they feel that it is like sort of like acidity or something, and they avoid that, right?
Yeah.
But if that becomes like little bit unbearable, or they sweat a lot, or they have some sort of clenching of the teeth, or there is a pain which radiates to the under side of our arm. So these are all the warning signs which say, or they suddenly feel giddy and they fall down and have a pain. So, or the family history is very strong. The father had, or a brother had, or a sister had a history of heart attack. So these are all subsets of patients. They should be very careful, right? And most of the diabetic patients, we have seen that they have usually the silent attacks. Like they will not have that sort of pain which usually the normal patients have.
Okay, so so in that case, so how frequent they have to go and do a checkup?
I feel that first it should be mandatory once you reach the age of 40.
Okay.
You should have your annual health checkup, like 40 to 50 years annually you can have. But once you start beyond 55 or 60, then I think every 2 yearly you should do. And 160 and above, then I think
frequency should
increase.
Okay, the another terms we used in the heart attack, one is they say heart attack, then they say cardiac arrest. Is there any difference there?
So heart attack means you really have means there is some of your blood vessels to your heart or anything is blocked, and suddenly the blood to that area suddenly stops, and your heart, the requirement of the oxygen, as you know that heart pumps the blood, so the requirement for the oxygen to the heart is very high, and suddenly it stops. So you have that. What is mean by cardiac arrest is that suddenly the rhythm changes or something, and then because the patient has a massive heart attack, one part of the muscle, it becomes, there is a hole in the heart, and suddenly the patient collapses, it loses its rhythm and everything. So that is called cardiac arrest.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Another important thing now, because the technology is evolving and everyone is moving towards the smart way of monitoring things, especially I too wear my smartwatch around the clock 24/7 to monitor my resting heart, the beat and other stuff. So is that a good idea to have that to monitor your, this thing? What are your suggestion on that technology perspective?
Yeah, I think we, as you pointed out, Govind, I really recommend that now the technology has taken us to a beyond the imagination, I think. So I think all the watches of Fitbit and all that thing, you can monitor your heart rate. So that's very important. That is what I say, even when you go to the gym or anything, and when you see when your heart rate becomes irregular or anything, that is a time where it says you that you need to stop, you cannot continue. So that is what I was telling you, that they suddenly collapse and all that thing is because, so yes, it is very good. And I would really recommend that if you can monitor your heart rate when daily, or you can, because I'm pretty sure that it is very common nowadays. Everybody wants to know and everybody's aware. The awareness has increased. That's very good.
And there are some watches, even I had Apple watches on the Samsung watches, even they have the ECG kind of system also. Is that they also even say that there is an irregularity, all those things? Is that a warning sign they have?
Yes, definitely. So, I say yes. The technology has advanced. So, and that's good actually. That's what I'm saying, that if you really want to know that the warning signs, as you correctly pointed out, it could be a warning sign that there is some rhythm problem. It's better to just go and evaluate yourself, whether it was just the technology fault, or it is really you have something, right?
So at least you have some indicator where something has been measured. You take a call with the doctor, and and also it's very interesting that it has quite a lot of amount of data also being stored. You have the patterns and other stuff. It will be very useful for the cardiologist to go through those patterns.
Yeah, I think we will I don't know about this, whether in coming age or coming time we would see a technology where your ECG and everything, your blood pressure or everything is recorded. And then just with the small chip, you can just have everything for what has happened to your heart rate, your blood pressure, or over 1 year or 2 years. And from there, you can pick up some abnormalities. And then, yes, it could happen, because the way the technology is going, those days will be very soon. And as you said, that correctly said, that few of the patients, as you said, that they are doing exercise or they are walking and they fell. So if the technology gives us certain signals, so we can even prevent that.
Actually.
Yeah.
That's, I think, especially when you cross a specific age, and the
Correct.
recommendation is that you have that monitor in place.
So, yeah.
Right.
So I feel that after 50, 55, you should really take care of yourself, and you should involve being more healthy and take special care of yourself, because that is the age where we should be more careful about everything.
Okay. So any other questions from the?
Yeah, doctor. Yeah, Venkatesh here. I have one question regarding these oils, because nowadays they use double refined. Can you just put some light on the oils, what we have to consume?
Mr. Venkat, I think if anyone of person who is hearing me commenting on any of the company's oil or anything, I think they're going to come to my door next tomorrow morning, and they're going to really hammer me. So I would just say that oil, that there are a lot of companies have come up with varieties of oils which are available, whether it is refined or double refined or whatever. I will not say any particular that this oil is better or this oil is the best. Whatever I will just say that I think even a half spoon is enough to make your daily even vegetable whatever, or you make any vegetable. Your half spoon is enough. I don't think you need more oil in a day for your food to cook. So I would refrain from saying a particular that this oil is good, because this is a general. Yeah. So I would just say just even a half spoon or 1 spoon is enough. I don't think that you require tons of oil. Like you require a lot of oil to cook your vegetables or anything.
Yeah.
But in general, if you see olive oil is considered to be good, you take it any brand of olive oil, it's considered to be good. Like we have, even they say Saffola Heart, or even if they say Sundrop, there are a lot of oil which are I think all oils are good, except you should have it consumed in a moderate amount.
Moderate.
That's what I would say.
Half a spoon is way below the moderate thing. In Indian dishes, we feel that oil is very much lavishly used in all dishes, so either it's fry or whatever you cook. Those are as a kind of a roasted thing. So probably I think the message is clear that use it
as minimum as possible.
Thank you, doctor.
Venkatesh, any other questions from your side?
There are so many things like basic, like water, the salt that we use, the oils that we use, the basic ingredients that goes into our food. Yeah.
I think what I would say is that even if you eat even any salt, like iodized salt, I think pretty everybody must be using the iodized salt at their home. But even if you consume just a small, whatever you're eating, or even a small amount is enough to that. But if you eat a lot of salt and anything, I think it may not be good for your health, right? So that's why I say that whatever you eat, it has to be in minimum and moderate. It should not go beyond, right?
One more question I have, Doctor. See, the block, when you say it's not just in the heart, right? I see some patients who have blocks even in the legs and other things. So what is the risk level for them to have a heart attack in future? What they should take care when they see such kind of things?
See, what you're talking about, the blocks in the legs and all, which we call as a peripheral artery disease, that is peripheral vascular disease, what we call. And this sort of patients, they are at high risk because they already have the blocks so the chances of getting into the heart arteries is also very high. Basically, we have seen that these patients are more smokers, they smoke a lot, and those all causes changes. Some of them, even they have the arteries, what we call as in our language is, the arteries become very reddish and inflamed. That could be also because of some genetic conditions. So yes, they are at very high risk as compared to the normal other patients, which you correctly pointed out. Yeah.
So I think they should have a regular checkups and
Not apart from regular checkup. Yes, they should be more alert. Yeah, that is what.
Yeah. Okay.
They should go for the Doppler effect, this thing.
Yeah,
Check.
usually we ask, suppose if you have a peripheral vascular disease, you usually want to know whether the blood supply to the below muscle and everything is there or not. Yes, that's very important. As you correctly pointed out, ma'am, Doppler is one of the way where we evaluate this subsets of patient, and this help us to know what happens is that some of the patients, they have a block, but they don't require an emergency operation. The nature takes care of it by itself. The other small arteries, they really, if the main vessel blocks, so what we call as the bypass channels, they open up and they try to supply the blood to that area of the part. Even the same thing holds true even for the heart also, ma'am. So yes, that is where the Doppler helps us. It helps us more in an acute stage rather than in a chronic stage. Suppose if a patient is having his arteries in the legs are already blocked for since like 10-15 years. So if those sort of patients, if you see a Doppler, you will find that the main artery is blocked, but there are various small other channels, collaterals, which we tell in our language, they are already formed and they supply that part. So those patients, they will be okay. Some subsets of patients that the block will be so small, but it will not give any time to them, and suddenly they'll come with like numbness in the leg, or the color of the leg will change, suddenly they'll become cold. So in those sort of patients, if you do a Doppler, you'll find that this bypass channels they have not developed. They don't develop immediately. So that is the difference between these two subsets of patients.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
So usually how fast
Numbness is a thing, is it? Numbness in the leg is an indication.
I think the coldness, your leg becomes very cold. That is your first sign. And the numbness definitely comes. And then it comes the pain, and then is the color change. But if you have a color change, it means you're already late. So if you feel that the coldness is there in the difference between both of your right and the left leg, or right upper limb and left upper limb, and you feel that certain sort of numbness, yes, definitely you think that there is something wrong, or heaviness. These are the warning signs that you should immediately think that there is something wrong going on.
Thank you.
And talking about this bypass, natural, whatever the capillaries or whatever you call it, how frequent it develops and how fast it develops?
It is very, it doesn't develop fast. I would say it takes little time. In some people it develops, in some people it doesn't develop. So it basically, every patient is different. It happens, means how they respond is different. I would not say that definitely this subset of patient, definitely they'll have collaterals and they should be okay. No, because it depends upon where the block is in the arteries of your heart, whether it is in the main artery or it is in some of the small artery, some branch. So if it is in the main artery, that is very important, supplying most of your 80% of the blood to that part of side of the heart, then it is a big thing. But if it is one of the small branch and it is supplying the little area, so that will be subsequently taken care by the collaterals, which will develop
this.
Yeah.
Okay. We have 1 more minute. We'll go for one last question from the team. Any specific questions you guys have? We can take it up. Okay, I think it was a very good session, Doctor, for clarifying a lot of doubts. Over to you, Rutenen Anand.
Thank you, Dr. Prakash. What an informative session we had today. We learned so much about organ transplant, its myths, healthy heart and lungs, and much more. I once again welcome you to attend our physical meeting at Galaxy Club. We may plan and take up many Rotary projects under your lead. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. I now request our Assistant Governor, Rotarian Rangaswamy, to say a few words. Rotarian Rangaswamy. Okay. Is Rotarian Pawan, Secretary of Whitefield Central, available? I request Rotarian Pawan to make announcements and pleasantries. Secretary announcements. Okay.
I think he got disconnected. I think he got disconnected. He was there a few minutes back,
Okay.
but I can't see him now.
Okay.
He got disconnected, it seems.
Okay.
He was traveling,
Okay.
so maybe in between the signals are not there.
Okay. Okay.
No.
I request Rotarian Jagdish, Secretary of Rotary Rajajinagar, to make announcements and pleasantries.
Hi, good evening all. Am I audible?
Yes, Jagdish.
Yes.
Yeah, good evening all. Good evening, Doctor. Thank you very much, Doctor, for this good session on the art and land transportation. Okay, it is a good interactive session. I thank Rotary Bangalore Volume Gateway. It is jointly organized along with Rotary Rajajinagar, Rotary Bangalore Whitefield Center, Rotary Bangalore Nexus. See, thank you very much. And this month, presenter is I want to see. December 10th, our past president Shivakumar Whitemurthy Shivakumar has celebrated his birthday, and December 13th, past president Venkatesh Murthy wife Kalpana has celebrated her birthday, and 14th December Pritam Sai is Anak Pritam Sai is celebrated his birthday, and today our past president Mr. Past President Narayan has celebrated his birthday. Okay, I wish all of these all of who celebrated birthday wishes from Rotary Bangalore Rajajinagar. And I will from December 11th, Venkatesh, our club service director, celebrated his anniversary. And the same day, Chidambaram, our Rotarian, celebrated his anniversary. And December 13th, our AG and our club past president, our club advisor Rangana celebrated his anniversary and 25th anniversary. That too. Okay. And today, our past president and district secretary Shekhar Babu has celebrated his anniversary. I wish everyone a very happy anniversary to everyone. Thank you very much. Over to you, Anand.
Thank you, Rotarian Jagdish. Thanks a lot. I request Rotarian Naveen Senna, Secretary of Rotary Nexus, to make any announcements. Rangaswamy, sir, I request you to say a few words. Rangaswamy, Assistant Governor of our club.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, all.
ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಹೇಳಿ ರಂಗಣ್ಣ.
ಸಾರಿ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, ಡೆಲ್ಲಿಲಿ ಇದ್ದೆ. ತುಂಬಾ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ತುಂಬಾ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗೆಲ್ಲ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಲೈನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ವೆರಿ ಇಂಟ್ರೆಸ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್ ಇದು. ಆನ್ ಬಿಹಾಫ್ ಆಫ್ ಅವರ್ ರೋಟರಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ಸ್ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಕೇಳ್ಕೊತೀನಿ. ನಾನು ಡ್ರೈವ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ, ಸೊ ಒಳ್ಳೇದಾಗಲಿ ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು.
Thank you, Rangana. Yes, I request Rotarian Naveen Senna. Is he there today?
No, he's not there, Anand sir.
Any announcements you have, Shashi, of your club?
No.
Huh?
No announcement.
Okay. Any other Rotary related announcements from anyone?
Anand, can you mention about the Bhagavad Gita and those books? Gita Jayanti, Gita Jayanti.
Sure. Past President Rotarian Ashok. We were just planning to distribute Bhagavad Gita books to school students. We are identifying whether to distribute it to 7th standard students or 10th standard students, students who would understand and who are at a stage that they would want to learn about Bhagavad Gita. There are other children's story books also, which relate to a lot of our ancient past and history. So I solicit funds from the members to enable this project. We are still at the stage of working it out. We would work it out and would come back with an amount and also the quantities. So once it is done, I would request all of you to support us in this initiative. Ashok, anything you want to add?
No, nothing. That's good enough. Thank you.
Okay.
Anand, we have the announcement from the gateway
Yes.
also.
I now request Rotarian Govindarajan, Secretary of Rotary Orion Gateway, to make your announcements and pleasantries.
Thank you, Rotarian Anand. Start with the upcoming projects. Before that, it's a very important and a special announcement. I just want everyone to hear that and try to spread this message. There is a special request from PDG Rotarian Rajendra Rai for plasma blood donation of any blood group to Manipal Hospital on Airport Road. Okay, his wife has been admitted and requires blood at the hospital. Please request everyone to spread this message and help his family at the time of that need. Very special announcement. Please do the needful for this. I request everyone to register for our district conference, Jashan, at the earliest. You can contact me for further details. We also plan to distribute 15 school desks and 50 dictionaries and 3 Britannia Illustrated Encyclopedia to a school in Thuruvekere as part of the Sahayoga project. This will be jointly with Rotary Bengaluru Downtown and Rotary Thuruvekere. We also plan to distribute cycles to rural girls as part of Girls on Wheels project, and additionally conduct a cycle repair skill training and development. We're also working on upcoming district project Vidya Nidhi, providing bridge school books to 10th standard students as part of the Sahayoga project. Pleasantries, January 20th, Rotarian Chetan Rai and Anne Seema are celebrating their anniversary. Wish them advanced anniversary wishes. And Rotarian Swati Rathod, she's celebrating her birthday on 21st Jan. Advanced birthday wishes to Swati. Over to you, Anand.
Thank you. Thank you, Govind. I now request Rotarian Sunil Sadev from Rotary Whitefield Central to present the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Rotarian Anand. On behalf of Rotary Bangalore Whitefield Centre, Rotary Bangalore Orion Gateway, Rotary Bangalore Rajaji Nagar, and Rotary Bangalore Nexus, our heartfelt thanks to Dr. Prakash. It was an excellent session, Dr. Prakash, where most of the myths are cleared about the heart health and how to keep the heart healthy, plus the organ transplant, which is still many people think that it's at the nascent stage, but you have already cleared our doubt that in India is at very advanced stage. Many thanks to you, and you are doing a wonderful job. Keep it up, doctor. Many thanks once again. It's the sincere thanks to you for sparing your time, and you are here for 1.5 hours. The way you have cleared our doubt. So, and to medically illiterate people, I think all the Rotarian will agree with me that all of us are medically illiterate. But the way you have clarified, it's really excellent.
I would differ on that illiterate word. I think so. We are living in a Google world where Google has become a dictionary where you can type anything and get an answer for it. So I differ on that point.
you know, Doctor, Google is okay. It's giving us a lot of information, but it's a lot of misinformation also, because we are not able to digest that information correctly. So the way you have given us that food today, we will be able to digest it properly. Digestion is, because for the heart, digestion is also necessary. Proper digestion is also necessary.
I think you all should thank Mr. Govind, because he's a person who said me that we just met 10 days back, and like we've become very good friends, and I really thank him. He just said that, can you do this? I said, yeah, it's okay. I can do this. What's big deal in that? I could be of any help, and if anything can help me to convey the message very loud and clear and make it clear, the doubts. We are always here. Doctors are there to help everybody. Unless I know that we have a bad name also, that doctors charge so much, they are like this and that. So that's a different story to it.
No, Rotarian Govind is really a very nice person, but you will find that most of the Rotarians are very good people, because we always go by our four-way test. We always, there is a four-way test where when you will attend any physical meeting, I think Rotarian Govind and Rotarian Anand will definitely tell you what is that four-way test. So most of the Rotarians you will find they are very good at heart. I don't know about the heart health, but they are very good at that.
No, I'm really thankful to Mr. Govind that he gave me that he made me his tenant, and I really found a good friend, and he's a wonderful person.
Well, my pleasure, Dr. Prakash. This is something very special to have you here also. And the way we got connected and the way you said immediately accepted for the talk, that's very important. I see that continuously is getting the calls and messages, all those things. In spite of that, he spent time with us to ensure educate us on the the myths and other facts about the heart. Really, thank you for your presence and accepting all the things.
I'm here now in your community.
And my thanks to all the Rotarians, all the Rotracts who have attended this and made it a big success. And a special thanks to our President, Rotarian Prasanna and Rotarian Pawan, to accept my request that let's have a joint meeting on a weekday also, because our club generally have the weekly meeting on the Saturdays. And still many members have joined today. Special thanks to them. Once again, Rotarian Anand and Rotarian Govindrajan, many thanks for you to make us a part of this wonderful interactive session. Thanks everyone. And at the end, I wish all the Rotarians and Rotracts very happy New Year and the Christmas holidays. Let 2022 be very heart-healthy year for all of us. Thank you. Thank you once again. Over to you, Rotarian Anand.
Thank you, everyone. Meeting is now adjourned. I request Rotarian Shashi Kumar also to remove your caller. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
We'll just keep the floor for open for another 5 more minutes, and if anything is
Sure. Let us connect.
Rotarian Govind,
Stop
I will
recording.
request